Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. Colleagues, once again, you are most welcome to yet another in the series of our Humanist TV Africa, focusing on consumer safety, and we bring in a number of aspects that concern the consumer. Once again, the air is still fresh and it does no harm to say Happy New Year to you all colleagues, wherever you are in the global world. We would like to thank you always finding time to join us, but all appreciation goes to the Humanist Media Africa. Out of all that they're doing, they are in position to give us the Humanist TV Africa on a weekly basis to promote consumer rights, empower consumers, and add on the building blocks to protect consumers. We'll appreciate an informed consumer is a sustainable entity to this planet that needs to be healthy, as we do not have any planet B. Having said all that, we would like to thank you for having given us a great opportunity of 2024, and we hope you'll give us a lot in 2025. So today, we are still unpacking the consumer annual report that brings out consumer voices of 2023-2024. All these, we are opening them, unpacking them to enable us effectively read into policy, read into regulation, and other frameworks to safeguard the consumer agenda and also cross-fertilize for better business. With better business, consumers get good services, good quality goods that are safe, and also it nurtures trust and confidence. Once consumers have got trust and confidence, that means the governance and policies are good, the businesses are complying, and the economies are thriving. Then the requisite resources are paid for through taxation or revenue, and then service delivery is done, and then the consumers will comment on the service delivery for its improvement. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, I am with my colleague, Bernard Bombale, Carlos. I would like to thank you very much for joining in, and he will, after my curtain riser, and marinating the subject matter, he will unpack and serve you what consent has taken time with partners, either to roast, bake, or to steam, and serve you a nutritious meal that will enable you to come out as a consumer, to speak out and up on issues that are affecting you. I always say that education works hand in hand with regulation. The regulation is not to impede, but it is to facilitate. So once we, through this small initiative and agenda, we educate you as a consumer, as a policymaker, as a business person, you have to work hand in hand with the regulators to look at those issues that do not facilitate delivery of quality, delivery of product safety, delivery of consumer welfare, delivery of fair trade, and delivery of fairness, equity in everything. So a happy consumer is, and a satisfied consumer is a reflection of, of good governance, of a good economy, and a sustainable nation. So, ladies and gentlemen, today we are looking at education. Like the saying goes, educate the mother, you educate the nation, but educate the consumer, being the largest and the biggest socioeconomic grouping. Once the consumer is educated, and the policies and the frameworks will be okay, because a consumer who is educated will speak up. So apart from speaking it from a consumer rights perspective and responsibility, as we were conducting harvesting consumer complaints, one of the sectors was education. Education that is formal, looking at institutions of learning. So consumers shared a number of things, but you'll find from a systematic way what was said in transport, what was said in communication, that was said in finance, what was said in health and environment, water and sanitation, has a role to what was said in trade, ends up having a role and linking it back to education. An uneducated or an uninformed consumer is not able to assert their rights. They are not able to speak up on where things are going wrong. Irrespective of today addressing the formal education, but there is also informal education. Our homes are institutions that provide us education. Just imagine your child or your relatives come from school and they share with you what they have been exposed to in school, that those of us who might not have been at that particular school, we are going to be exposed to new information or new disinformation or misinformation that can be misleading. But once it is positive, then we will be in position also to be beneficiaries. If I use the analogy in smoking and say those that are directly smoking can be a threat to secondhand smoking. Those of us who are near those who smoke at times, we can also be affected by those that are directly smoking. Now, I'm bringing all this to show the interlinkages. A lot of us, we benefit from the education of our trainers, capacity builders, our role models, our parents, our offsprings, or our siblings, our friends. So education is very key in whatever we do, whether formal or informal. But today, we are unpacking the education sector. In the education sector, there are many challenges, but there are also many goods, all positive. But you'll find that apart from the education sector, where consumers speak of one aspect and the other, there are many other aspects that affect them in a way or another. So quality of products that are used in the education services is very key. You'll find that school fees or tuition fees or service fees can be paid. But there are other requirements. Their quality too is very key. If the quality of scholastic materials isn't good, that in one way or another will impede the service delivery of the school establishment. If the quality of the service provider, like teachers, isn't good, then it will affect. If the quality of energy, electricity, isn't good, it will affect education. If the transport that takes students, pupils to school is of poor quality, that will also affect education. If the communication facilities are not good, if the financial services are not good, if the environment, the water that schools access is not good, it will affect the education sector. So, ladies and gentlemen, if the market from which the food that the school-going consumers access food from, whether by themselves or the education institutions, is of poor quality, whatever they access, let it be food, let it be electricity, let it be gadgets, let it be all any other services, they are not of good quality, the education will not be good. So, ladies and gentlemen, with me, I have just shared the overall views. And now I would like to welcome my colleague, Bernard, to share with us, to unpack the report so that he goes deep into that. But with me, I was just giving you the linkages, the back and forth linkages that facilitate realization of the education governance, it plays a role, and so forth. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bernard Wambali Carlos, you're most welcome to give us what was deep in the report, the consumer voices and their aspirations. Bernard, you're most welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Henry. Just confirm that you are able to hear me. So if you're hearing, then everyone will be hearing.
Yes, I am hearing you. That shows that also you're hearing me, and that's why you're taking course of action. So thank you, Bernard. Go ahead.
All right. So thank you, listeners and our colleagues who are always viewing this talk show. And today, again, we are coming to share with all of us issues of the consumers when it comes to the education sector. Of course, aware that currently the education sector is booming across Africa, really. Every parent would want their child to go to school. Every parent would want to give the best education to their children. Every parent is now struggling to make sure that at least they have a professional in their home. So the issues of education have really gone beyond the earlier days where you would have probably one degree in the entire sub-county. Currently, everyone really is trying to make sure that they have a degree or a diploma or even a PhD, whatever it is. So meaning that there is a lot of work being done when it comes to the education sector. So there's a lot of investment that is happening by private sector. People are investing in academics, especially when it comes to the private schools. There's a lot of investment that is really happening, and of course a lot of competition that is also happening within the private entities that are setting up universities, colleges, and secondary schools, primary schools, and nurseries, but even daycare. So there's a lot of work being done, but of course all that is complementing the efforts of government to come up with a clear education system. Perhaps the government, maybe a case for Uganda, we realize that the government is actually having primary or secondary schools and universities across the country, irrespective of the challenges. But I think education is really being supported here and there. And of course, as we're going to look at some bit of challenges, irrespective of the fact that government is prioritizing education, I think that is in words, but of course, quite a number of challenges still exist in the education sector, as alluded to by the consumers out there. So, of course, as we've always been taking you through some of the findings from the consumer report, what are the consumers talking about when it comes to the education sector? So quite a number of interesting issues that have been presented by the consumers when it comes to issues of the education. Now, let us begin with the school-going children. Quite a lot of interesting things here. One of them was about the school requirements. Most of the complaints that the parents were actually submitting was to do with the school requirements. We're talking about 80% of the complaints. And by the way, in that 1 year, we were able to collect 1,854 complaints specifically for education. So we were able to gather 1,854 consumer complaints that was tailored to education, specifically education. Of course, you're aware that we were talking about 20,000 complaints, but now these ones are specific to the education sector. Now, when children are going back to school, the school administrators will give you a long list of items that they require in addition to the school fees, functional fees, and tuition fees. Now, for instance, most of the private entities now, people go with even the smallest items you would never think. For instance, children are going to school with a knife. Probably they will be peeling banana or something, and the school is not ready to invest in buying knives. So children are now going to school with a knife, with a broom, with a scrubbing brush, with even a rag to mop with. I mean, quite a lot of things. Now, just imagine if a parent is home, is struggling to get tuition fees and functional fees, but then they have to go an extra cost of buying the requirements, what they are calling requirements. So they tell you, okay, so you come with a knife, you come with a brush, you come with the toilet paper, you come with a rim, so many things. Actually, when you total the cost that is being used to purchase those items, and then you look at the cost of school fees, you'll be surprised that actually most of the costs that the parents are incurring are on those items that the children have to go back with. Surprisingly, some schools do not allow children to actually start the term unless they have paid for those things. Just imagine if a school is constructing and then every child is coming with a bag of cement. Now they say, if you're not coming with the 2 bags of cement, you'd rather go back home and first pick it. So quite a lot of things. Now, when a parent puts together the requirements that the school requires at that particular term, it becomes so overwhelming that they even decide that maybe they take their children to day schools where they can maybe relatively pay less money. Even when the parents are willing to support their children through school and give them the best education they could have, but because of the requirements that the schools need, most of the parents actually regret. And if nothing is done around that area, there is a risk that many of the children will actually be left out in the education sector because their parents have no capacity. The dues, the school dues, and then the requirements, it's quite too much. So parents who don't have the monies are likely to decide on whether to leave their children in school or just to drop out. And so you'll find that even when we have a higher dropout rate, now the rate is going to even increase. So you will end up having minimal children actually completing school just because of the cost of education. So that was one issue that actually almost everyone complained about. And we're talking about 80% of those who complained. So literally meaning that almost everybody presented that. Now, one of the unfortunate bits around that is about the regulation. When it comes to this country, this is a case for Uganda, of course. Now, when it comes to Uganda, there are quite a number of questions we need to ask ourselves. Do we even have a policy or regulations that actually tell or regulate the schools or guide the schools on what requirements are actually are supposed to be taken by these children. So if such regulations are not in place, or if they're in place and they're not being implemented, then that's where the issue is. Because ideally, a country should set up a standard of what would be a kit for a child to come with at school. And I know that the existing frameworks are talking about the particulars. A child, of course, is supposed to have uniform, is supposed to have the scholastics and whatever. But when it comes to things like a broom, like a brush, like a knife, like, those are things that I think administrators are failing to add on top of the school fees, amidst charging school fees that is highly exaggerated. So there is need for a policy framework. There's need for regulations on the requirements for children to go to school. Apart from the common ones, scholastics, and what other is Ministry of Education supposed to guide the schools so that there is no exorbitancy when it comes to schools. So I think it is according to the ministry that I know we have a policy in place, but it is the role of the ministry, especially the minister, to come up with regulations. Otherwise, the private sector, even currently the government institutions, will just charge the way they want. And I mean, that stands as a risk of many children actually dropping out of school, and which will not be very good for the country that is still growing. The other issue was related to laboratories and the libraries. The education sector, if, for instance, in Uganda, we want to promote more science than the art subjects and want the children to actually love to be scientists, and then we are investing a lot of money in science. That is a claim of government, of course. They say that, okay, even the government science teachers are being paid more than the arts teachers. Now we see about 59% of the parents or consumers out there submitting issues to do with infrastructure, especially when it comes to the laboratories. Just imagine a child in senior 4 who has to do the examination, practical examinations of chemistry, physics, and biology, but they have never had a lab. They have never seen a laboratory during the course of their study. They actually go and borrow some laboratory equipment or apparatus when it comes to examination time. The guy has never had an opportunity to even see an apparatus. Maybe they have not seen, let us say, maybe you need a filter, or maybe you are looking for a pipette or something. They have never seen it. They have only heard their teacher talk about it, but they have never seen what it is. What is a burette? What is a pipette? They have never seen, even when they're talking about a plasm in physics, whatever it is. Children have never seen these things, but they're in senior 4. They are studying, and in the next few months, they'll be doing final examinations that will require them to actually go to the laboratory and do things practically. Now, someone has never seen a beaker. Someone has never seen, when you talk about a favor says, they have never seen, they don't know what it is. They only hear about it, but they've never seen. And now you want them to compete with someone in a city school who has been seeing these things from senior 1. If you're talking about physics, the apparatus, the equipment we use in physics, the ones we use in biology, the ones we use in chemistry, these kids, especially in the rural setting, have never seen. Live around the rural setting, even those in urban setting, but in government institutions, probably they have never seen. Imagine a school where you have senior 4 students, maybe about 600 of them in one single class. And then you have a laboratory that can only facilitate maybe 15 or 20 at a go. So at what point do we see these students really understanding the concepts, getting this magic, getting these ideas? Where do we see those? Now, in the same infrastructure issue, there were issues to do with computer laboratories that you'll see in towns, in cities. We see schools grooming, youngsters who are now using computers. Even teachers are teaching on computers. But what about in the village? Look at that photo there. What happens now? These children, when will they ever see a computer? First of all, they don't have any classroom. Secondly, even the basic of having a desk where they can sit, they don't have. You can imagine a child who goes home in a uniform and, they are seated on bare soil, on bare ground. How do you expect these children to even know a computer. You can even see that there are no classrooms, they don't have desks, they don't have, you can even see how the teacher is really struggling to make sure that the children are able to learn from a blackboard or a chalkboard, whatever it is, but under a tree. So what happens when it starts raining? Assuming it starts raining right away, the teacher is teaching, the children are seated down on the soil, there's no shelter at all. How do you expect these children to actually concentrate? Look at that teacher. She's doing her best. She has come to school, but look at the concentration of all the children is perhaps on the other people who are passing by, or maybe those who are digging, or the tractors that are. You can see that they are staying in the farmland, and this is where the teacher is trying to, teach these kids. But the teacher is actually writing on the board, but you see the concentration of the children is elsewhere. Now, infrastructure-wise, how are we ready to actually improve the infrastructure to enable learning happening? So these learners, ideally, they have no capacity to grab things given the nature of where they are actually learning from. So the learning environment alone is not the best. You see, you want such a child to get a first grade. Where do they get it? And that's why you'll go to rural schools and they tell you for the last 10 years, the best candidate has always had maybe the worst second grade, or even those are the bright kids. So the issue of infrastructure development has to come out every time governments are planning for education. We cannot risk starting to think that we are running, schools and whatever without infrastructure. We need the classrooms, we need the laboratories, we need the libraries. Now, those children you've seen, they will go to university if God helps them to go there anyway, without seeing or knowing what a library looks like. And then you want them to do research. Where do they get research from if they cannot even have, government cannot provide them a facility that can actually show them that, hey, people have written books and so you can go do research and whatever. Now, this is not only affecting the children, even the teachers. You will learn that most of the teachers that we have in rural setting, they are not facilitated to actually teach the learners. And that is why then we had about 57% of the consumers complaining about the nature of training of the teachers. So they were talking about, we don't actually have trained teachers, well-trained teachers. But I think the issue is not about the training of the teachers, but also the circumstances under which these teachers are actually trained. There's a time where I come from, I wanted to have a quick inquiry and research about the teachers of primary schools, specifically in my district. I learned that most of the teachers who are actually providing academic services in rural setting, these were our brothers and sisters who are not able to go either to A level, to go and do A level, HSC, because they had first of all failed at O level. The ordinary level had failed. And so the option was that, well, the colleges, the national teachers' colleges could take them. Now, the question is, why should we take the poor cream, the poor quality, to come and teach the children whom we want to be quality citizens? It's a whole it's a whole paradox. So just imagine that a teacher, somebody who has failed senior 4, and so is not able to continue to advanced level because of the grades. Now, that person is the one we are taking to the National Teachers College so that they can be trained and they come and train our children. This should be a joke, really. That the worst should come and teach people so that those people become the best. It's usually impossible. You see, what you know, you will teach it well to those kids. Now, the kids are being taught by people who don't know things, but because of the nature of our system, they can be allowed to go to teachers' college. And that's why you see in the olden regimes, teachers would be the best students at O level or A level, and they would go to the university as the outperforming students. But these days, you see that the best students are either going for law or medicine or engineering, which was not the case, because now it is the teacher that is going to, bring the children to love these things. So we see that many times the failures would be taken to colleges to go and be teachers, and they come back and they start teaching our children. But I have also seen, because I am also a victim of UPE, I have seen that our teachers, someone is teaching, let us say, primary 5, but the book he used to teach us in 2004, it is the same book the guy is using in 2023. So you even see a teacher handling his book, and the book is really, you see the book is old. You really see the book is old. Now, the guy has used the book for the last 15 years, teaching students or pupils from whichever level it is. Now, it's like at university, you see that content keeps changing, science keeps on evolving, but the person is still teaching elementary science that changed. For instance, when I was in school, when I was in primary school, people who have the sicklers, people who have sickle cell anemia, during those days, science was indicating that children with sickle cell anemia can never get malaria. The malaria that we talk about, this Plasmodium malaria. Every person who had sickle cell anemia, in the books of science then, you cannot have sickle cell anemia and you get malaria. It wasn't anywhere. You couldn't see it. And in science, that was it. But with evolving science, we see that now it is just that it wasn't well studied. These kids can actually get malaria and die of malaria, actually. Now, science has evolved. Now, if a child currently who is in primary school, primary 5, is still reading the same book, that sicklers cannot have malaria, then it will be a troublesome generation. So science keeps on evolving, and so we need to make sure that even the teachers are really empowered. But the question is, where are they empowered from? If they don't have equipment, they don't have materials, they don't have a library to read, they don't have access to new science and materials, how will they boost their knowledge? How will they advance their notes? How will they improve the content that they're going to give out there? So the issue of poorly trained teachers is really critical. And that is why the government of Uganda has to work very hard, exceedingly hard, by the way, to make sure that all the teachers are actually empowered. I have seen that government called on the teachers to come back to school and do a degree. I think they were given about 10 years or so. Maybe that could help us in this area. But I think it goes hand in hand with infrastructure. As long as the teachers don't have infrastructure that can enable them to do research, learn better, or maybe capacity building for teachers, these teachers should be able to have trainings, at least trainings, and then they are able to teach our children even better. And so I think that was another big issue that came through. More than half of the participants really complaining about it. Now, there was an issue on curriculum. Now, curriculum, again, more than half of the participants, we are now talking about 58%, they were complaining about the curriculum of our children. Now, when you go to school and people are studying more theoretical things than actually the practical things. Now, if I could give some bit of quick examples, someone was challenging us that, you see, my child comes home and they are able to draw an insect. Now, drawing an insect, a parent assumes that, okay, so what would happen if my child couldn't draw an insect? What goes away from my child if they cannot learn how to draw an insect? Besides, they will be seeing insects. So something of the sort. The curriculum is not giving skills. Of course, I know that learning about insects, one could be an entomologist later in life, but someone was presenting it as a case. So what happens if my child does not know how to draw a bee? Okay, what happens if my child does not study prairies, the American prairies? So someone is in secondary school, but they are studying Canadian prairies. They are studying the stones in the river X. I mean, so what would that student miss if they don't study about the Canadian prairies? Besides, they may never see them for the rest of their lives, but that's what they're studying. What about if these kids were taught a skill on, how do you make hair? How do you make soap? How do you make, how do you do, maybe saloon issues? How do you do computer work? How can you be able to type a letter? How do you make a website? Those soft skills. Instead of our children studying things that cannot add value to them, that actually they can live without. So people complained that, well, I think the curriculum really doesn't add sense to our children, apart from really us paying fees and all that. But imagine in a school where maybe children are learning how to do tailoring, how to do, handwork. In the olden days in schools, we used to have handwork. Actually, I remember in my P3, we used to do handwork up to P6. Handwork. You should be able to make a mat. You should be able to make a hoe. A hand hoe or something. At least there is some practical bit of it. You should be able to do some bit of weaving, and which has actually collapsed in most of the schools. I remember that actually most of the time we were the ones destroying nature, because in my school, children would make mats from papyrus, and it was part of the handwork. But what happened now is that many times we are focusing on, how to pass an exam, and so we are giving children a lot of things that may not be relevant. So the parents are still complaining about it. I know that now government of Uganda tried to review the curriculum to bring in practical skills for these children. Now the question here remains that, well, who are now the teachers to teach the new curriculum? Have they been trained thoroughly on the new curriculum? Or they will teach the new curriculum the way they were teaching the old curriculum. So I think it's a whole issue of understanding that, well, curriculum transition has also to transition with capacity of the teachers. So as we are rolling out the new curriculum, teachers must be given advanced time, by the way, to go and learn this new curriculum. It's even unfortunate that the curriculum was launched before the teachers were trained. Now the teachers are being trained on the curriculum that they are teaching. Now, how is that? So you see that the teachers and the students are all learning the same curriculum. All of them are still, conceptualizing the new curriculum. And I think it would be nice that before governments come up with the decision, they have to look at the implications of the decision. How is the curriculum affecting the teachers? And so how will it affect the learners? So whereas there are those good strides of making sure that the curriculum is revised, then we should empower the teachers to actually understand the new curriculum and be able to actually train the learners using the new curriculum. Otherwise, we shall be wasting energy. Already the teacher is disempowered, and now you are disempowering them the more with the new curriculum. So it will be very nice that really we take a lot of attention on capacity building of the teachers when it comes to the new curriculum. There are, of course, other issues to do with the insecurities in schools. Now, we've seen in most of the schools now, we see fires. You hear a school has burnt. There is a fire outbreak in a school, and then 1 week later, there is another fire outbreak in the school, and then another. So there's a lot of insecurity happening. Now, you see that most of the government schools, for instance, are not fenced. If you come to Uganda, most of the primary schools of government are not fenced. They don't have a fence. But these are toddlers, these are young kids that are playing all over. What happens if, for instance, the rebel groups entered the schools? What would happen? Okay, what about if you see there are people's animals grazing in a school, and then the kids are also in school? There are other wrong characters passing in a school, and the kids are also there. So what happens now if a kid is abducted, if a kid is beaten up by unknown persons, because of these circumstances of insecurities in some of the schools? So it's, I think, mandatory that some of these schools must really have protection measures for children who are in these schools, so that we prevent the issues of insecurities in most of these schools. But also the requirements for schools to come up with some things. What is the principle? What is the policy on electric extension in schools? Because the fires are coming from electricity. What would that mean? That maybe there was poor installation, or maybe there are some bit of naked wires, there is no insulation, and etc. So the issue of insecurities have to be managed in all schools, whether government or private. And so that means still government has to set regulations to curb the issues of insecurities in some of these schools. Now, other people are, of course, talking about having certain levels of education in their communities. You've seen some communities that have never seen a university or a college or even a secondary school in their area. And so people are thinking that maybe that could be inequality. Someone is not able to come from the mountains in Kasese, maybe to study from Makerere University, but maybe they can study if the university is near Kasese. But I think the government is also trying to make sure that they have regional universities. I've seen one in Barara, one in Fort Portal, I think one in Gulu, one in. They're trying, but the community still thinks that things like colleges, where you're empowering young people with skills and whatever, they should be widespread across the country, so that people are really not disturbed when it comes to moving and moving to Kampala, and you leave your family the other side, and all that stuff. So the issue of insecurities was also very critical when it came to this discussion. Now, of course, there are quite a number of other issues. For instance, if you look at the health and hygiene issues in the schools, there are some schools that have one latrine for over 600 children. Now, how are we dealing with water, sanitation, and hygiene issues in our schools? So there are issues to do with sanitary facilities in those schools is a little bit worrying. That's why you will see that when you go to most of the schools in our communities down there, children are competing to actually use the washrooms. And yet there is a standard for the number of stances that are supposed to be in a school for a particular number of children. But some of these regulations and policies have not been, first of all, executed by the government itself, because most of the government schools are victims. That actually you find one latrine that has been in a school for the last 15 years, and you can't imagine that the children are using it. And so that already poses a risk when it comes to, water and foodborne infections in those schools. There's always a risk of, cholera, dysentery, diarrheas in schools, just because of the nature of the washrooms that children are actually exposed to. By policy, each of the washrooms is supposed to be having a section for men and girls, for boys and girls. But in many of the schools, we see that actually there's a lot of sharing between girls and boys. But if there's no sharing anyway, you find that 500 boys are sharing maybe one stance, and then the other group of girls, which is usually the majority, are also sharing one stance. It is even worse in some schools that teachers are sharing with children, which is a pity. It is ideally that the teachers are supposed to be having their own latrine, and then the children are having their own latrine, and they're not sharing, girls and boys, and they have quite a number of stances depending on the population in that school. But what we are seeing in our schools is that so many children sharing one stance, and boys and girls sharing, even teachers sharing the same with the students. It's a little bit embarrassing. Just imagine a teacher going for a long call in a particular school, and then a kid has also gone to another room, and all of them are really doing business. So sometimes it can be difficult for a child and a teacher. There's a lot of humiliation, in other words, that happens when these teachers are sharing washrooms with their kids. And I think government has to look at it immediately. And I think when it comes to private entities, private schools are trying, but also they are trying to copy what the government is doing, because they say, well, I think our neighboring government school is just having 3 stances for 1,000 children. I think there is nothing big. So there are quite a lot of issues when it comes to such things. What about the water points? I have seen schools that have designated places. I think this is private sector. The private schools have come up with, areas where children are picking drinking water, clean drinking water. Unfortunately, where there is clean drinking water, you also find 1 or 2 cups. But these are 1,000 children. So 1,000 children sharing 1 or 2 cups. Now, this is why you see in schools, there's a lot of coughing, there's a lot of flu, there's a lot of, these acute illnesses, because children are sharing materials that are not supposed to be shared. Just imagine 10 children, all of them with the flu and cough, maybe chronic cough. Let us say maybe that. And then they're using 1 cup with their colleagues who are healthier. So you find that even the healthy kids, they end up taking on the flu, the cough, and usually it never cures so easily until they build a lot of immunity, just because of the sharing that really, really happens out there. So there's a lot of mess when it comes to the sector. We need a lot of hand washing facilities, a lot of latrines that fit the population. We need water points that children can pick clean drinking water. I mean, it is just by standard that children are supposed to have access to clean drinking water. Now, in a situation where they don't have access, more so in a school setting, then you expect a lot of breakouts of diseases in such schools because of the sanitary issues, the hygiene issues. They can be contested and children really suffer locally. So those are things to do with the sanitary practices in schools. What about schools where the bushes sometimes overgrow when it comes to rainy seasons? Who takes the blame? I mean, the children have nothing to do with bushes. You must be able to give them a conducive environment for studying. Whether private or government entities, we need to make sure that the sanitation around the schools is actually top notch, because if there are mosquitoes breeding from a bush that you guys have failed to clean, or maybe you have stagnation, you're not covering potholes or whatever in schools, and there's a lot of stagnation and children start getting malaria, who is responsible? So it's an issue of making sure that there is a sanitary kind of principle in a school, that our children are able to have clean drinking water, they are able to have sufficient rooms for latrines, and then they are able to have, and actually we are aware that some of these schools are having even disabled children. So it means that when you're constructing the latrines, because that is by principle, you must have latrines that have access routes or ramps for children who are disabled, or even for teachers who are disabled. Even when they enter inside the latrine, there should be provisions for those who are actually disabled. But what is happening in our schools, you go there and first of all, there are no latrines. If they are there, they are minimal. If they are even the minimal ones don't have provisions for people with disability. So all of those are issues that are in our schools down there. Now, let us look at now the urban schools. What is happening in our schools is that you find a child of P3, P4, and the child is carrying over 15 books. And you wonder, what is this child studying? 15 books. And by the way, the 15 books are not these small 32-page books. When I was in school those many years ago, my mother would buy one book and she cuts it into two pieces. And I mean, one book when I'm in P1, P2 was sufficient for two subjects. She cuts it in the middle, and I have one piece for science and one piece for social studies. And then I have a book which she cut into two pieces. One is for mathematics, one is for English. And so I would carry literally two books, two small, actually four small books, which cannot even weigh a kilogram. Now, currently, a parent buys 4 choir books for a P2, rather P4 child, and the child is carrying a bag, and you don't really understand what is in that bag. Only to open, you find a multitude of books for a P3 child, 4 choir. What is this child studying at P3 that is making him carry 10 books every day? So one is for coursework, one is for what, and a lot of writing. And you see, very soon children will be having challenges with their backs. So meaning that the structure of these children's back seems to be tending off. And so very soon, sooner or later, you start hearing that there is a chronic issue with the backs of children. And so because now I understand that the system is tending to change because of the heaviness of the books that they carry. Why should education become a challenge? Why should it be a cause of disease? Why should it increase the risk of children having these diseases? It's a whole paradox. And I think we need to revise every day how many subjects are studied in a school for a particular class. And those should be the books that are carried. If not, the school should provide where the kids can keep their books and go home with a few. And actually, it is a very big challenge now in the city schools where a child carries 10, 15 books on the back. These are literally 5 or so kilograms additional weight to the child that is really irrelevant at that particular point. So we need to revise some of the things when it comes to policy provisions, when it comes to regulations, when it comes to the system itself. How is it? We need to think about it. Now, in the urban cities, or even in urban areas, we have now private schools. If children, of course, are day schooling, they commute home, they need to pick them. And so you see a child of P3, primary 3, and the child is waking up at 4 a.m. Actually, 4 a.m. a child is on the road. Child is on the road going to school, 4 a.m. And by the way, this kid just slept at around about 11 after doing the homework. Now imagine 11 up to around about 3, the child hasn't had enough rest to sleep, but the child is already awake, and the child is already on the school van going to school. 3, 4, 5. You find young kids, and you're like, okay, when did we reach here? I think the system is failing us somehow, because these kids, one, they need to rest. That is one, because they're still growing anyway, and resting is part and parcel of their mandate. They are supposed to rest. And actually, if we're bringing this from the perspective of human rights, it would be criminal to have these kids waking up by 3 a.m. By the way, it is not only affecting the student, but even the driver. The driver by 3, he must be out looking for children to take to school at 3 a.m. It's a whole mess. What about the parents who are not also very sensitive, that at around about 6 a.m., your child, maybe you have 3 children, and all of them, you are putting them on a border. You see a parent putting 3 children on a motorcycle, and each one of them is carrying a huge bag. I mean, when did we reach here? What is the safety of our children that are going to school? Are they able to learn? Do they reach school actually when they have concentrated minds to actually learn? These are aspects. So you find parents really, it's a mess. It's a really mess. Our children on motorcycles, and there are 3 of them on one bike carrying heavy bags, and anything can happen in the jam, and a lot of mess that is happening. We need to be careful on the safety of our children. The safety of our children is even better than the education that we are giving out to them. Because after all, they will not have the education unless they are safe. So how do we deliver our children to school, and how do we bring them back home is something of interest. What about the meals? When these kids are at school, which kind of meals are our children eating? We've seen that many schools, they have preservatives for food so that they can keep longer, the whole term of 3 months. So they are purchasing maybe beans and put some bit of paraffin to preserve them, or maybe they are putting rodent poison to treat the beans. And that's why we are seeing currently schools with food poisoning. Kids running to being taken to hospital because of food poisoning. They've eaten chalk, they've eaten tar, they have eaten paraffin or kerosene, they have eaten a lot of mess when it comes to the diets in schools. What about now when you start saying that, well, children must have a balanced diet because that is their mandate, that is their right, they have a constitutional right to that. And by the way, we have a child protection policy which guarantees that children must have a balanced diet. They should have access to safe and nutritious food. But what happens in our schools? 3 months down the road, someone is taking beans and posho. I mean, is it the diet we are talking about? Where is it written, by the way? And yet people are paying a lot of money. So we need to think about what are the diets in schools that can actually promote learning given in a better way. So quite a lot of interesting things that are happening in school that are not supposed to be there. But I think we have also given a blind eye, and the government is not talking about it anywhere. And so it is silently dying in there. We've seen the people who serve meals at school. Someone is preparing meals for children in our schools, and a person is cooking food while naked, no shirt. The guy is sweating all over, and the sweat is going to human food. I mean, when did we reach this kind of level? This is immorality of the highest order. We cannot keep on quiet. But the question is that now, where are the head teachers? Where are the inspectors? Where are the education inspectors? They were supposed to be inspecting this, that when you're preparing food in a school, you're supposed to have an apron, you have to put on, they are basics. Actually, I would even recommend that going forward, we should, in schools, because we are serving food to human beings, and we are serving food to so many future leaders and future relevant people. If it were possible, it should even be mandatory that the schools should recruit school cooks who have either a diploma or a certificate or a degree in catering. Why not? Because these guys have gone to school to study how to cook in a healthy environment, cook foods that is safe, that is nutritious, and etc. Why then can't schools recruit them? And we are busy crying that we don't have jobs when we have so many schools, but they don't have people who are cooking food. So I think it would be very good that we need to start recruiting these guys so that they come and cook food for children, and they are paid a salary because they have gone to school to study quality and safety of the food. How is food stored? How is it prepared? How is it served to children? And which kind of food? All of these things have to be incorporated in the school, in the school principles. So as we come to the end, we need now to look at other issues like co-curriculum activities. Schools are not meant to teach children academics only. We need to have co-curriculum activities. But you come to Kampala schools or urban schools, they have no space, they have nothing. It's only academics. We need to think about the brain, the body, and the soul of these children. Are they going for sports? Are they going for dance and drama? Are they doing other practical things at school, co-curricular activities? They should be able to go to church and pray, mosque to pray, or whatever, so that they are holistic. You are training a human being. You are not training a part of a human being. You're actually handling holistically a human being who must have all these things interplay. And so it should be able to, the education system should be able to bring out a holistic individual who has developed skills, who has been participating in co-curriculum activities, and then also academically sound. All of these can enable our children to actually do better when it comes to the schools. We need to invest so much into infrastructure. We need to give people computers, because that is the era we are going to anyway. We need to make sure that infrastructure-wise we have, we have libraries in place and all that. So, of course, the issue of paying a lot of money versus the services offered in school still stands, that people are paying a lot of money, but they're getting less. So all of those are aspects that I've just been talking about. But of course, the divide is so huge that in villages, computers are not there, while in towns, somehow they are there. You see people learning with tablets in the villages, tablets are not there. Now, of course, that's why Henry was talking about the integration, that all these sectors are integrated. For instance, they cannot have computers unless they have electricity. They cannot have electricity unless they have other services in place. They have a road to support them, go to school and all that. So it's a lot of work and it's a lot of integration that we need to undertake to make sure that our people are actually having the best education than ever. Now, lastly, there are also teachers who are complaining about salary. Now, the teachers are equally consumers, they are equally parents. Now, if a primary teacher can only earn 600,000 and they are paying rent of 200,000, they are paying for electricity, they are paying for water, they are paying for, so they feel that they cannot even be able to educate their own children because of the low pay that they actually get. So in real life, the teachers are actually unable to educate their own children, even when they are teachers. So the teachers also were calling upon government to look into enhancing their salaries and be able to get something so that they can be able really to live according to the present living standards. Otherwise, they will teach other children, other parents' children, and theirs will stay home because they are not able to afford to do that. So I think, Henry, those are some of the aspects that came through during the course of collecting the consumer complaints, both from teachers, from parents, from students, and also from us, the experts who have been looking at all these things. I think it's worth noting that we need to improve the education sector. If we are to prioritize it, then we need to do a lot more work. So I think over to you, Henry. That is it that we can share for now. Of course, we shall keep sharing in the subsequent discussions. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bernard. And you have unpacked, you have related, you have grounded all issues that touch humanity. Colleagues, education is one of the basic needs for consumers, whether it is formal or informal, and that is very key. So education is a right, it's not a privilege. So every consumer needs to access education. So what we have had and what has been shared, these are voices. I know that they touch all of you. I know these are voices that affect you in one way or another. And like the consumer rights says, that these are basic needs. They guarantee our survival, our livelihood. And once you are informed as a consumer, you are educated. Just imagine us leaving school when we have had non-empowering education. We are misinformed, disinformed. All this leads to misleading. So we are not able as consumers to do sustainable sustainable choice. We can't lead a sustainable life. So it is very key for us consumers to be critical, to take action. We need to speak out on education. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like us to end here today by thanking you for listening in to us, watching us, and to make sure that we continue empowering. We are using Uganda as a case study. Some of these issues clearly touch you wherever you are. We do not pick up these consumer voices, the consumer complaints. We harvest them to make sure that the consumer agenda that is to benefit you and me is through speaking out, being educated, taking on your responsibilities or our responsibilities as consumers. These responsibilities of being critical, taking action, and speaking out make better businesses. And as we continue to advocate, they make better policies, regulations, legal frameworks, and better institutions to deliver us in quality life, service our quality life, enable us to be productive and be able to participate in production, responsible consumption. I would like to close by saying, as consumers, all the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, have a role to play with our lives. Sustainable Goal 12 talks of responsible consumption and production and plays a role there. It is us, the consumers. We need to speak out on issues that affect our responsible consumption, that affect the responsible production, which the irresponsible production affects the environment we live in, affects our health. Sustainable Goal 3 talks of good health, good well-being. Irresponsible production and consumption keeps us in poverty. Irresponsible consumption and production will never make us realize zero hunger. It will never make us realize equity, having decent employment. It will never give us sustainable cities and communities. It will never bring in innovation. If we are sick, we cannot be productive. We cannot protect our environment on land and in water. We cannot stop emissions, but with responsible consumption and production through education, empowerment, and partnerships, we can realize that. So thank you very much for listening to us. Aspects to do with the consumer are systematic, and they are in every facet of humanity, every facet of the one planet we live in. It must be healthy for us to be healthy, to enjoy our quality of life. I look forward to being with you next Friday. Last Friday, we were not with you. We were attending the CADAP meeting that was in Kampala that made a new declaration. That was the Kampala Declaration for the Comprehensive Agenda for Agriculture for the next 10 years. The strategy, we're very happy as consumers and consumer advocates. It is talking a lot on quality investment. It has elements to do with food safety, quality product safety, and issues, urging our respective governments to invest in realization of quality of our food, the safety, and issues of facilitating trade, and many other issues. But all that needs good governance and political will, and even us, the consumers, to hold accountable to our duty bearers to make sure that whatever is enshrined in any policy, in any regulation, in any legal framework, and even institutions that are obligated to serve us, do serve us quality goods and services so that we have a quality life. So as consumers being the biggest or the largest socioeconomic grouping, we are drivers and are enablers of quality production, quality life, quality business, quality economies. Once the consumers are not well catered for and are not healthy, the fundamentals of consumer protection are not taken to care, our economies are not sustainable, and our nations, our environment isn't sustainable. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to us. I wish you a superb weekend and look forward to being with you next Friday. Thank you very much, Humanist TV, Dennis, our producer, our host, Paul, Kato Mukasa, and all the other teams that are with the Humanist Media Africa. Thank you very much. Nice weekend.